So this is part two of the wildlife composition, different things to think about. So moving on, where do you compose the shot? What do you cut off if you are going to cut stuff off? This shot sort of does have a lot of things cut off, but it's very intriguing because there's a lot of room in the background for this elk to look at. He was shedding his velvet. That was interesting. If you look at the composition, it's kind of close to the third, putting it off there. But if you square crop this, it kind of loses a little bit. That's kind of interesting. I mean, there's dead middle. His eyes are out here. The ears are out in the thirds. That's interesting. We cut off the antlers. But what you're looking at, all photography is about emotion. And where does the emotion come best? This shot is a little bit more interesting than square cropping it. The animal, what makes this shot work is it's looking straight down the barrel of the lens. It's very interactive, and that makes the shot really kind of cool. Take a look at this. This is a shot where there's hardly any interaction. It's just an elk being a bum, just sitting there. His eyes actually closed. I mean, we've got space around, but most people don't want to see pictures of animals sitting down. That's not interesting. But using just the head, now a sitting down elk is a little bit more interesting. So the way you compose the shot is going to depend on your situation. Taking a look here, here's a shot that I feel is almost perfect. We have a great bull elk bugling. He's bugling out across. We have great eye contact. We can see all the antler points. The focus is great. We've got lots of room out to the side for it to look. The only nitpicky thing you could complain about is the fact that these aspen trees are kind of a little bright coming out of the back of his back, but that's kind of hard to control since he's standing in front of a grove of aspens. But if you look really closely, you get in close, you can see, man, he was peeing all over the place because this is part of the rutting behavior. Capturing behavior and capturing the emotion is really kind of cool. So here's a perfect example. We've got two elk fighting. Look at the intensity and the muscles, but we can't see this elk body at all. We can just see the antlers. If you're going to capture two elk, if you capture two things interacting at all, you want to try to get them so that you see both their bodies. Both their eyes are really important. Here's a shot where we got the intensity again, but we really can't see its eye. It's also way off to the side of the frame. We definitely can crop the image. Here's the final image that I got of one shot. We got two eyes that we can see. We got lots of intensity. Look at the intensity in the muscles. They're really pushing. They're actually kicking up dirt. And I had to crop out the bottom here because this was all blurry. Turning it into a panoramic shot was much more interesting. Here's the actual shot. We got a bunch of blurred down here. This really isn't interesting up there, so cut it down to where it's interesting. But the reason I selected this shot is the intensity in the muscles and the fact that we have two sets of eye contact. If you look here, two sets of eye contact, but they just look like they're standing there up against a wall. I mean, it's really not interesting, not a lot of intensity. So if you're looking at interaction, it's all about emotion. Again, interaction with two deer fighting. Here we got way overexposed. The light was kind of bad, but the fact that we can't see both the deer's eyes really impacts. We can't see the antlers locking together really well. So you come across, oh, they're really starting to get at it, but all we can really tell is there's two deers with their heads down, and maybe they're fighting. But here, you've got interaction, you've got fighting, and we've got a little bit of a sparring action going on. There's practicing before the rut. So here's a perfect example of cutting off body parts. Bad light again. This is a little bit too close on the side. We cut off the feet, but the lights, there's no eyes. We can't connect. The light actually blocks the eyes. So take a look at here. Okay, this is a nice shot that you saw in one of the other videos. And we got okay light. We definitely can see the eyes. We can't see the back side of the body. We have the feet back there. We focused right here. We have a shallow depth of field at f4. We stopped the motion, but that shot's interesting. The fox sitting down is even much more interesting. We see the backside, the tail, and it's sitting alert. Great posture with the eyes and great emotion. So taking a look, as soon as the fox looks away, no emotion. We really can't see the eyes. It doesn't tell much of a story here either. We don't see what it's looking at. Here's the bighorn sheep coming right down the road. We got a huge 3/4 curl ram, big, we got movement. The things to look for though, we've got a foot raised. That's implying motion, but we stopped it. We have a shutter speed of 1/400th of a second, shallow depth of field. I had to go up to f6.3. This is an f4 lens, but at 6.3 I could get the tip of his nose to his rear end in focus. That was important because he was starting to get kind of close. But that's emotional. Here again, a pack of wolves in Yellowstone. We have a few howling as they are greeting their leader, but it's much more interesting when all the wolves are howling. That's a much more interactive shot, capturing the action and capturing the group dynamic. Taking a shot of a mule deer here, the ear's out of focus a little bit, but it's just a deer looking across. It's not interactive with the viewer. It's just a deer head posted on a wall. But if you have the deer looking at you, now he's interacting with you, and that's a much better shot. But remember, wildlife is not just the wildlife itself and where it's looking, but also the background. How does it interact? Here's the same shot just a few minutes later. The deer was hanging out at McGregor Mountain Lodge, and the railing there really takes it out of the mystery of wilderness. So we have a nice focus, but it really doesn't add much to this shot. Background's important. Again, interaction. We have this squirrel coming down, and it looks like he's kissing. Actually, this is the guy chasing the girl during mating season, and she's checking him out. It's not perfectly in focus. I focused on the eye, but I wanted to have a little bit more depth of field that I didn't have, and sometimes you miss it. But you got to be ready to capture what you can. Cutting off his butt, though, really doesn't change much. The interaction moment is right here, and that's what makes an interesting scene. Again, interaction, putting these two Wyoming ground squirrels down, lots of detail. I wanted to blur the background to show where they live, and the interaction, the nose-to-nose of rodents greeting each other. And here, look at this guy. He looks so just devious. He's got a big smile on his face. Anthropomorphizing animals is not bad. We had nice soft light on. There's a little bit of light poking through. He's got his hands like he's plotting some type of evil thing. We didn't cut off the tail. There's room everywhere, and he's got room to move off. You could make an argument of cropping that. It all depends on what you feel like doing, but don't cut off animal parts. It's also about waiting and waiting for the right moment. The right moment happens with wildlife photography, and when I look at my pictures, I find that it's roughly 1.2 seconds. And if you wait and you get the good light and you wait around, something magical happens when like two badgers, especially with that little head here, that was cool. Not perfect, but it was really an interesting element instead of seeing a bunch of badger, the tops of their heads. Getting up close, the emotion here is the deer looking across the scene. It's kind of like a mount, but I use a really shallow depth of field to blur the background. I want to see just the eye. And cutting off the body here is okay. I wanted to cut off, so I wanted to see just the eye, and positioning the eye is sometimes more important. So sometimes you can cut off body parts and not ruin the picture. But sometimes you can just get way too close. This mule deer was really more friendly than it should have been, and it literally walked right past me. I had a 500 millimeter lens, and it was right there. Focusing, I call this shot an eye and booger shot. When all you see is the eyes, the eyelashes, and it's really not interesting. There's no story to tell there with the animal. Here's a story. Here's this big bull elk, giant rack. He's covered. One argument I'd make, I cut off his feet. Got a little too excited and started clicking away. But I had to deal with some brush down here that wasn't interesting, so I cut that out. Made the sacrifice, giving the animal room to go into. That same wide spread, we've got room for its feet, got a lifted leg. That's interesting. Here's interaction again, but I cut off body parts. These guys were so close, I just couldn't back away enough to get the shot. But I didn't cut off anything really important. We got legs, we got the antlers. It's just the shoulders that we cut off that makes it okay. It's not perfect. Here we got them bugling. We cut off the legs though. Go down, point the camera down a little bit more. There's room for something called virtual legs, bugling out to this side with a lower f-stop. We've got just the eye in focus, blurred the background. Here, the coyote, this is him coming up to a kill. That's kind of interesting, but the eyes here are really interesting, focused right on the animal. Here with the deer, head down, not really interesting. It's not really interacting with us, but when it looks up, he's like, what? That's interesting. That gives you interaction. Again, look at the movement with legs too. From here, the legs back, but here with the leg forward implies movement and implies emotion of the animal moving across the scene. Here, it's just straight interaction. Cutting off body parts isn't all bad, but it also is important about light. Having your light just right, that's not great. But look in here, you got interaction, good light, good direction, and that's what makes wildlife photography interesting, with the moving animals interacting with their scenes. Where do you put them? You give them room to look out to this direction. You don't cut off body parts. You get good exposures, and you get them where they're in nice open environments. Don't have a lot of junk sitting in front of them, and that's how you're going to get great wildlife pictures.